Have you ever nailed your slides but felt like the room wasn't completely with you? Well, today you're going to learn why. My guest, Rebecca Williams, is the co-author of Presenting: The Art of Public Speaking and How to Do It Better. And she grew up backstage at the opera. She mastered performance and then discovered that it was blocking real connection. In this episode, you'll get to steal her first 5 formula to hook any audience, flip nerves into usable excitement, and build a talk the right way, off the laptop, on the wall with a pen, so delivery feels effortless. If you present at work, on stage, or on video, this will change how you open, how you land your point, and how you're remembered. Stick around, hit follow, and let's turn performance into presence. It is a pleasure for me to be able to introduce you today, my guest on Present Influence, Rebecca Williams. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
I've been so looking forward to speaking to you. When we had our pre-episode planning chat, we went deep on a few things. We work in a very, very similar area, but you have co-written a book on presenting, and I think we have a lot of things in common. I'm going to be curious to find out if there's some things that we maybe don't both share the same opinion on. So it'll be interesting to explore some of these ideas. But I'd love to hear from you first of all. What sparked for you an interest in presenting and speaking and storytelling?
Yeah, thanks. What really started it all off for me was growing up in a family that was an opera family. So my dad was an opera director, and we lived all over the world. We lived in Germany and Toronto, and ended up in Texas, where he opened his own opera company. And when I was a kid, he was always pulling me up on the stage and saying, hey, I need a kid for this role. Like there was no foresight in it. It was just, he was solving a problem in the moment. And he said, oh, get on stage, Rebecca. And so I became very comfortable with performing on a stage. And I loved, my dad would teach me how to essentially work the audience. He taught me how to make them laugh. He taught me how to capture their attention. And I didn't think too much about it. That was just something that happened in my childhood. And then I go into my life, and I worked in Japan for a while teaching English as a second language, and then landed back in the States and started doing, because I love communication and storytelling and all these things. And so I started working at, consulting for tech companies and things like that on storytelling and communications and leadership communications. And strangely enough, it took me a long time to realize this about myself, but when I would present for my corporate audience, doing a training or whatever, I didn't realize it at the time. It took me many years to figure it out. I was still performing. And I knew there was something off, but I didn't know what it was. And I just thought, oh, I'm just nervous, or, oh, I'm just, not used to this, or I'm stressed by the client, or, whatever it was. But then I had to write my story for a project I was doing. And I was like, well, what is my story? How did I get here, essentially? And what became clear to me was that skill that I learned from my dad, how to perform, was actually hindering my professional success, because it was preventing me from connecting with my audience. So I had to unlearn performing, and I had to learn how to, the irony of learning how to be authentic, right? I had to just allow myself to show up as myself. So that's been my real journey with it all, and why presenting is so, it's big in my heart for that reason.
Yeah, I think I see so many people in the public speaking and professional speaking world who do treat it as a performance and are very much in that space. And I probably would agree with you that it potentially does damage the connection. So what are the kinds of things that help you to move more into the realm of connecting rather than performing, and maybe that helped you and how you are helping other people now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a couple of things that I always share with clients that I'm working on. And also just I remind myself of all the time because I'm constantly presenting and teaching and training people. One of the simplest things, and your audience is probably going to say, well, duh to this, but you would be surprised at how many people forget. And that is to always connect with the audience first. So what does that mean in practice? It means leading with a question. It means getting a read of the room by talking to people in the audience before you take the stage. It's literally connecting with people before you go into delivering some kind of message. And one of the speakers I love the most is Sir Ken Robinson. He did the TED Talk on creativity. Did you see that?
I did. Yeah, absolutely my favorite TED Talk ever. Yeah.
Oh, he's so good. And I've watched that so many times and I've shown that to my students so many times. And he goes out on stage and he just walks out and he pauses and he says to this like audience of 500 people, he's like, so how you doing? You know, and everybody just cracks up because it's a TED Talk and he takes the time to just do the simple thing of connecting with the audience. And his talks is such an example. It's a great example of authenticity and connection. So leading with a question is hands down, it's my favorite piece of advice to give speakers. And then the other one is to take on a service mindset when you are speaking. So Gandhi has a beautiful quote that I often quote, and it says, "You come alive when you lose yourself in the service of others." And for me, that says a lot because I'm doing a big presentation on Monday for this company that I'm working with in Amsterdam. I could be really nervous about that because it's high stakes, but instead I'm shifting it to, okay, what can I give them or what can I teach them that's going to help them understand this thing that's going to help them be better at their work? And so I'm coming at it from that perspective. And when you come at it with service, it really takes the edge off because it's not about you. It's about your audience and helping them.
For me, that was one of the two big things that helped me push over fears of being up on stage and messing up talks and all of that. That was probably one of the biggest ones. So just making that decision that this isn't even about me. I'm doing this for them, not for me. So they probably don't mind too much if I mess up. But the most important thing is that they get the message that I'm here to talk about and that I give them that as clearly and as entertainingly as I can whilst I'm on the stage. But I know the other big thing for me of getting over the fear of getting up on the stage in the first place was simply just reframing the whole thing as all my fears were really just excitement at how keen I was to get up there and talk on the stage and do this and share a message and do something valuable. And so it was all really very much based in already based and rooted in service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a researcher and a teacher at, I believe it's the Harvard School of Business, and her name is Dr. Allison Wood-Brooks. And she has done research into this feeling of like being nervous before you do public speaking. And what she's found is that you definitely, sure, you feel nervous, like most people feel nervous, even if they're very seasoned public speakers. But what's true is that nervousness has a certain tone to it, a certain vibration. And so does the emotion of excitement. It's the same vibration. And so if you can train yourself to, instead of associate that vibration with nervousness, to instead associate it with excitement, like you're saying, then you do yourself a huge favor because you're framing this experience in a different way, which means you'll have a different experience. So, yeah.
It's interesting. I got asked at the weekend, I was delivering an introductory story to a competition, and I got asked by one of the competitors if I still get nervous when I get up on stage to, whether it's storytelling, stand-up comedy, or keynote speaking, do I get nervous? Like, kind of. it's different to how it used to be. There's no real fear of it because I enjoy being on the stage now. But there's still a little bit of nerves of just that I want to do a good job. I want to get up there and do the best that I can do. And so I think if I didn't feel any of that, a bit of excitement, a bit of tension to get up on stage, I would be a bit concerned. How do you feel when you're about to go and speak these days?
Yeah, it's interesting because I definitely have a process of preparation, and I'll share my process because I think it might be helpful for people. So I'm working on a talk right now, and my first step, it's never on the computer. And this is one thing I try to really emphasize with people I work with, especially people who are working on TED Talks, for example, is don't start on the computer, because the computer is very different energy than, for example, starting on a big whiteboard. Or for me, I take these big sheets of white butcher paper and I stick them on my wall. And then I take a big Sharpie marker like this, and I'll like kind of scribble stuff and be really rough with it. And from there, something starts to take shape. But it allows for the creativity to happen, because what I found is that if I start on the computer, if I start writing, then I get in this, I like to call it mouse mode, like oh, should I use this word or that word? Oh, I forgot my punctuation, and I get really nitpicky, and I haven't even figured out what I really want to say yet. So I like to say, stay in eagle mode first, get out a whiteboard or butcher paper, Sharpie marker, and scribble. And then once that gels in your mind of like, okay, this is my key message, this is the flow of how I want to take it. And I'm going through multiple sheets of big white paper. Maybe I have sticky notes where I'm like, oh, I want to say this one line, and maybe I can say it here. Oh no, I'm going to say it over here. So you can change your mind still in this phase. It's much easier to do that. And then once that gels on the paper, then I add it to my computer. And then I create slides to help me tell that story, which it's another thing I see people doing is they'll build their slides first, and then they'll figure out what they want to say. And I'm like, what? That's exactly the opposite of what you want to do. So finally I'll build my slides, and then I'll start rehearsing it, and I'll give myself a healthy amount of time to rehearse. And what I know is that if I still feel like anxiety, I wouldn't even say nervous. I would just say like anxiety, like it's more than just being nervous. It's because I haven't internalized the flow of the talk yet. I need to know what's coming next. How I say it, that's something a little bit different, but like, what is the next step here in the flow of what I'm saying? So if I feel anxious, then I know I need to keep working the flow. And then when that anxiety starts to take the backseat a little bit, I know that I'm building some fluency in what I'm doing, and then that excitement really takes over. So it definitely, people are going to feel nervous. They're going to feel probably some anxiety. But if we give ourselves, like, number one, even having a process to know when you're ready is so important. It's one thing I see people struggle with too, is that they don't have a process and then they freak out. So, yeah.
I think that's important. I similar to yourself, I'm a little hands-on with this, a bit old school of like, I like to write things down first. I just remember being in so many personal development seminars over the years. Oh, when you write, we write with your heart. I was like, I don't know if that's true, but I get into much more of a flow when I handwrite stuff, and I write in sort of secret code, which is otherwise known as my handwriting, because no one else can read it. But I can still read it back. And then when I got it all down, that's where I'm happier to transfer it over when I know what I want to say. But there's always that trust at the start, that I always trust that even if I struggle to put things together initially, the flow will come and that things will figure out. But you have to get into it and start putting things together. Is there a particular structure that you work with, not just like a particular process, but is there a structure you work with of creating talks as well?
Yeah, I generally use, and I also teach, what I call the first five formula. And the first five formula, I developed in just many years of working with people, because I kept seeing them have the same struggle over and over again. They would fail to connect with the audience. They would fail to tell a story. They would fail to deliver a key message. They would fail to create interest by introducing a problem. And they would fail to build structure, like let us know where you're going with this talk before you launch into it. So the first 5 formula I created to meet these failures essentially. And it's 5 points, and it's meant to be delivered in the first 5 minutes. Usually it doesn't take quite that long. It's usually more like 3 minutes, 3.5. But first 5 formula sounds good when you have 5 points. So we'll take it like that. And essentially it's your presentation first impression. So it's connecting with the audience, hooking them with a story, point, delivering a clear point, problem, introducing a problem so that they want to listen to the rest of what you have to say, and then agenda. So what are you going to say? Like set it up for us. And that's generally what I teach everyone I work with. And I've seen it be successful. I've seen a lot of people say like, oh, well, that's not going to work for my situation. Or, oh, I can't do that because I'm speaking at this conference, or what, like, no matter what situation that comes, I say, hey, let's try this. And I've had 0 issues. It's just all been people saying, wow, that really helped. And that was so easy. And, basically like, thanks for helping me figure out how to get into the talk. Because I would say that a lot of people, they know what they want to say, but they don't know how to get into it in a way that is conducive to the audience wanting to hear more. So that's what I teach.
I know you've taught and even guided and coached people in different environments. Who do you most typically work with? What kind of clients do you most find yourself working with?
Yeah, well, it depends. I work with companies and I work with individuals. And on the company side of things, I tend to work with companies that have, for example, like a lot of technical people, highly analytical people. So I work a lot in the blockchain space, crypto space. I work with a lot of scientists. Generally, and I'm generalizing, but I think that most people would agree that it's true, that technical types and analytical types, they tend to struggle with storytelling because it's a more emotional style of communication. And either it's that they don't see the value in it, or they just don't know the mechanics of how to do it. So they're really good at relying on data. They're really good at using jargon and very technical explanations. But as you know, it's important to hook your audience with some kind of emotional hook if you want them to take in what you're saying. So on the company side, those are the typical areas I work in. And then with individuals, I work with a lot of people who want to, for example, they want to do a TED Talk, or they're delivering a talk to a group of people and they need help polishing it. They need help also with delivery, especially like impassioned delivery. I've seen a lot of people who, like, let's just say they're maybe overachievers, right? And so they write a brilliant talk. They don't really need help with that. They memorize it, don't need help with that, but then they deliver it like a robot. And I'm like, it's not landing for me. And it feels like you're phoning it in. And, it doesn't serve the purpose of the talk. It doesn't meet your objective. Like, you want people to do something and you want to move them so that they do something. So, yeah.
There is, it's interesting, this has come up in some conversations I've had recently with other guests as well, but this whole idea of the essence of communication and about that it does need to be more than just the words you say. Like, yes, for sure, words have the biggest impact in what you deliver in terms of how you're understood. But if it's a dry delivery, if it's a bit boring, if it's unemotional, people aren't going to connect with it in the same way, then maybe not even going to understand it in that same way. So do you think that that really a talk can't be fully effective without bringing in these emotional levels?
I love this question. I would agree. I think that in order to be persuasive, if that is our goal, instead of just sharing information, which, any LLM could do that at this point, right? Like our sweet spot, our secret sauce of being humans is that we feel things. So yes, in order to bring others along and either change their behavior, persuade them to do something, then we have to hook them emotionally, because that's how persuasion works. It's Aristotle, right? Ethos, pathos, logos, right? The pathos is the storytelling. And if you're not speaking to the heart, even if you're an analytical person and you're listening to it, it won't quite have the same effect. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can completely agree with you on that. I think it's one of the biggest things that tends to be missing from people's presentations. And perhaps that's where people do start to get confused into thinking that it needs to become more of a performance to get to doing that, rather than finding those other ways to connect into their own message, their own stories, and connect and be relaxed and more natural with the audience. How do we get to being that more connected and, I'd say, entertaining and engaging when we're on the stage as well, rather than just the robot delivering the words?
Right. Well, I think so much of it has to do with not taking yourself so seriously. Like I struggled with that a lot. I still do. But I've been working through it. And I think so often, like I'm actually looking at my little notebook right here. I had a discovery call with someone earlier today, and I'm just going to read a few lines that I wrote from his mouth. And he said, "Oh, impromptu speaking, I'm more nervous, and because there are more chances to screw up and, more chance that things could go wrong." So there's so much pressure in those words. And sure, there are moments in time where it's high stakes and you have to perform, right? But I think that there's more fight or flight going on than is required. I think taking ourselves too seriously really is the kryptonite of public speaking. And again, going back to Sir Ken Robinson, like he walked out on the stage and was like, "Hey, what's up, you guys?" That is the exact opposite of taking yourself seriously. And he had a blast through that whole talk. He just cracked jokes and also delivered a super powerful message. So I'm curious, like, where are we getting these ideas that we have to be so serious and polished and professional? There are plenty of people who aren't doing that and who are having great success.
Yeah, I've done whole episodes on this, but this whole concept of I think people get trapped in professionalism. It can become a cage of, you think that you have to show up a certain way in the environment that you're in, and I can understand it. There is such a high pressure to conform to what's around you, and even to mimic or to mimic what's come before you, what you see as being the norms. And I think many times people are putting on their persona, go to work, but that's not who they really are. And they don't want to show up as an emotional person or as a fully expressed person because they might be seen as unprofessional. And I think that is something that ultimately holds people back in multiple ways, because, if you want to be a corporate mannequin or robot and be like everyone else on the production line coming through, that might work to some extent, but what gets you noticed, what gets you maybe standing out for leadership, is finding that way to be who you are and be different from other people in unique ways that will be noticeable. So I'm not sure I'm expressing it 100% as well as I want to, but do you get where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I 100% get it. And I fully agree too, that having, and I just want to say, like, having something to say is so important. And I think a lot of people, what I see is they're, like you said, they're kind of hanging back because they're like, "Oh, I don't want to step out of line," or like there's a Japanese expression called "The Nail That Sticks Out Will Get Hammered Down." Right. So I see a lot of this. And in Australia, they call it tall poppy syndrome. And I see a lot of this. People are afraid to stand out or be different or actually have something to say. And to me, I get it. I understand I have a lot of empathy for that because I used to be that way too. And at the same time, you're right. I think that is exactly what holds someone back and what causes a lot of anxiety and pressure and potentially causes people to fall down in the moments when they need it the most because they're putting themselves on such a high, what would you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? Like standard or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I get you. Ultimately is that, and we judge ourselves far more harshly than probably we would ever judge anyone else. And I was talking to you about the story competition on Sunday night, and I spoke to all the people who were competing. I was just introducing because I competed in a previous one, but all of them were saying the same thing, and all of them criticizing themselves. And actually, you were great. Why are you thinking so? Well, the audience loved it. People were laughing in your presentation. Why do you not think it was good? Yeah, that's what we're like when we do things like this. So we're just looking for all the faults. We're looking for everything that could be wrong. We see a photo of ourselves and we see all our flaws. We hear our voice and is that what I sound? We're just so critical of ourselves in so many ways that I think sometimes if we could just see ourselves how other people see us, like be disconnected, which of course is not possible, I think we'd be a lot kinder. Probably we wouldn't be so harsh because generally we don't talk about that or treat other people that way.
Exactly. I'm curious for you, John, since you started this podcast and you probably watch a lot of these videos and you see yourself all the time, you hear yourself all the time. Has that self-criticism gone down for you?
Yeah, big time. I am not somebody who enjoys looking at photos or videos of myself. I'm as far away from a narcissist as you can get, but I don't worry about it now. I think the only time I worried about it recently was like I was doing this thing is I was just kind of bothered with my hair, just sweeping it all back. And then I watched back some videos when I was editing. I was like, oh no, that looks awful. I need to stop doing that. So it's like still a bit swept back, but it just looked so bad. It's like, no, I definitely need to stop doing that. But I'm not looking at it, that I'm so embarrassed or anything like that. I'm not embarrassed.
Right.
The way I see it is I'm out here doing something that I value doing, and anyone who's watching or listening hopefully is finding the value in it rather than spending all their time looking at my hair thinking, oh, he looks ridiculous. So if they are, and that keeps them watching for a whole 45 minutes, great. But hopefully they're getting more out of it than just that. So no, I worry about these things less and less. And and that kind of ties in with the other, maybe the other thing that has lessened my fears about presenting and speaking and even doing stand-up comedy or something I was terrified to do until I did it. Is just the more you do it, the easier it gets. And the less you do criticize yourself. My first open mic stand-up comedy night is a great example of this actually, because several people bombed before I went on. It's open mic, you're allowed to bomb, right? That's the whole point of them. And I had given myself permission to bomb. I'm like, okay, if I go up and I get no laughs whatsoever, I'm in the same boat as these guys. It's no big deal. And I can come back and try again if I want to, or I can say, oh, maybe it's not for me. That's not how, I got a lot of laughs. I was very happy with it. But I had full permission to bomb. But because I'd done that for myself, I could relax. So there was no high stakes for this. There was no reason to be super nervous. Nothing was really depending on this other than me doing something that I had on my bucket list forever.
Yeah. I did something like that recently. I did this open mic storytelling night here in Lisbon. And part of the reason why I did it was because I wanted to challenge myself to not rehearse at all and just go up and just tell it from memory, like one and done kind of thing. And I stuck to my commitment to myself because I also didn't have time to do a bunch of rehearsing. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to go and have fun. And I got up there and I had so much fun. And I I didn't end it the way I thought I was going to end it when I thought through how I was going to do it in my head. And I kind of, it was funny because I was kind of going in that direction. Then I kind of forgot what I was going to do. And I was like, and I was kind of struggling. But then I just threw something else in and everybody laughed. And then I just got off stage and I was like, oh, I just figured that out in the moment. And it was super successful, probably more successful than what I was going to say before. And that gave me so much confidence in myself. And yeah, to your point about like, you just get used to it over time. It's one of the things that I've noticed too with students and clients is I tell them, I say, make recordings of yourself doing your talks or doing public speaking or whatever, and force yourself to watch it over and over again, because you just get desensitized over time. You're like, oh, okay, I guess that's just what I look like, or what I sound like.
Yeah, I think it's just years of editing video of myself. Because I started the podcast back in 2019, our pre-COVID podcast. And so I just so used to seeing video of myself and hearing my own voice playing back. I just don't even think about it anymore. I'm completely desensitized. But
What up?
It is, because it didn't start off that way. It started cringing and looking at something, thinking, oh gosh, I need to change this. I need to hit the gym and all that, because I still do. But it's much less critical. It's just get on with the job that you're there to do.
Exactly.
What you're there to talk about is more important than how you look. And even if there are, I say this to clients, and I say this to people in videos as well, that if your audience is more concerned with how you look than what you have to say, that's their problem, not yours.
Exactly.
So let them get on with that. If they're too shallow to be able to see past a hairstyle they don't like, or a body shape that they don't like, or whatever it is, leave them to it. But most of the audience will connect with what you're saying and will value it. There is do you think about this yourself when you're speaking, that there's always going to be a percentage of your audience who aren't going to like you no matter what you do or say?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. The people who sit in the front row with their arms crossed and it got like sucky lemon tea.
Sit in the front row.
It's become a game for me now that I just ignore them. Like it's so pleasurable to just ignore them and focus my attention on other people who have good vibes. Yeah, it used to bother me, but again, another thing that you get desensitized to if you do it enough.
There is an element to that. I do think that professional speaking is one of the fastest ways to advance yourself personally, not just professionally, but personally, through a lot of change and transformation, because you do really have to work through moving to a point where you care far less about what other people think of you, and you focus more on the skills and the art of it and getting into what you're doing. You have to get past yourself. And that's one of the big personal development challenges of anyone's life. But I think professional presenting, or any kind of presenting or public speaking, pushes you through.
Yeah, agreed. And I've talked to friends who are 10 years, 20 years older than me. And the one thing that seems to be a red thread behind their own personal development journey is each one of them says, oh yeah, my life really changed for the better when I realized that it wasn't about me. It's all about service. And it's what we were talking about before, again, in shifting that gaze away from yourself and putting it on the audience and being in service to the audience. Yeah, I think there's a ton of personal growth that comes through that. And it's such a, it's taken me a long time to get there. And there's a little bit of a tug of war with it sometimes, but it's so wonderful to mostly be on the other side of that struggle, because before it's just so much self-doubt and it wasn't fun. It was like there was always some tragedy going on in my mind about how terrible I was at something. And like who wants to live like that?
One of the best things that really ever happened when I started my journey into professional or into public speaking at all, really, was the guy was learning presentation skills from a very good presenter, although I would class him as being more performer than a connecting presenter. But But he was very, very good at it, very slick and very, very experienced. And a friend of mine who was an ex-girlfriend of his had some video of him from when he very first started. And she said, if you're feeling afraid, just watch this. So we sat down together and watched these videos, and he was terrible, absolutely terrible. And I'm not going to name names. I'm going to embarrass the poor guy, but he was absolutely terrible. And I said, oh my God, I thought I was bad, but this is terrible. And she said, yeah, exactly. You're not starting from where he is, but look where he is now. It's like, all right, that makes me feel so much better.
Yeah.
But I see that now when people say to me, oh, you find this so easy, it's all confident and you can just get up there and do it. And like, yeah, but it hasn't always been this. And I wish you could see the journey.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even I'll bring it back to what I wear on stage. I remember many years ago, I did this talk and I wore all black, like this black dress, black shoes. I didn't wear glasses back then, but I was wearing all black. And that talk sucked. It was so bad. It was so stiff, and I had a friend in the audience and I talked to her after and I was like, how was it? I said, I feel like it wasn't good. And she said, maybe it's the outfits. Like she was really direct with me and was basically pointing something out. Like I hadn't even thought about it, but I was kind of wearing armor with that audience. And now I wear really bright colors and, not flashy, but I just I want you to look at me and I want want us to have an experience together and I want it to be playful. And even that has developed so much over the years.
Definitely makes a difference. I've got a great episode with a lady called Kay Korsh not that long ago, all about this. Like she held speakers to dress well and to look great on stage.
Yeah.
Focuses very much on that. It's well worth checking out for anyone who's thinking, oh yeah, maybe the outfits do make a difference.
Yeah, they do.
When we connected before, one of the things we were talking about was about the deficit in communication ability in corporations. And I'm going to go necessarily huge deep into this, but there was a very interesting statistic that we were both aware of, which I was surprised that I had just found out, but you were already aware of it, about that something like 91% of employees think that their bosses are terrible communicators and don't trust them.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know about the trust piece, but I know that the 91% think that their boss is not an effective communicator. Yeah. Isn't that incredible? I mean, that's a vast majority of people.
It is. And it seems to ride in the face of all these corporations who bring in people to do presentation skills training. And what it perhaps suggests is they bring people in to do the training, but it's not really getting followed up on. It's not really getting implemented, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to a lot of what we've been talking about right at the beginning, which is connection. I think there is, I've never worked in corporate. I'll say that right here, being transparent. But I feel I've worked with a lot of people in corporate, and I feel like there is this real pressure to not show vulnerability. Like you've got to just show that you know what you're doing all the time. This steely face, and you have to have all the answers. And I lived in the Bay Area for almost 20 years, and I know that culture especially exists there. I had a friend who was working as a developer in a pretty big company, and I remember we were chatting about something, and I said, well, why didn't you just say that you don't know? And he's like, oh, no, you can't say that. And I was like, what? How is that even possible that there's a culture that doesn't allow people to admit that they don't know something? Like that seems very unhealthy to me. But yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure. And so leaning into the connection piece and being vulnerable and things like that, which I 100% believe that this makes you a better communicator. It's almost not welcome, or it's definitely not in practice. Yeah. What do you think about
that? So some of that ties into the professionalism stuff we were talking about earlier, but I do think there are these sort of archetypes of how we think we're supposed to be in particular situations that we tend to follow, and they're not always conscious. But it is just this huge ends up being this huge pressure. I think it creates a lot of cortisol. Practically, it just ends up being massively stressful. If you're trying to be someone who isn't you, anytime you're trying to show up in any environment as someone who isn't really you, or someone who can't really express yourself fully, if you are restricted in those sorts of ways, it all gets bottled up and it's going to come out somewhere. And so it might end up coming out in anger. It might end up coming out in addiction. It might but it will come out somewhere, and somewhere negative, the chances are, unless you can consciously find positive ways of moving towards better expressing yourself and things, checking in more with who you really are. But I think the only real way to get there is to bring who you are more into those situations and find your authenticity. It's certainly something, the authenticity conversation is something I definitely would like to get into more, but I think we might have to bring you back for another episode for some of the other things that we didn't get to talk about today, because I do want to make sure before we wrap up today that we mention your book, because I think it lays out so clearly all of the most essential elements for professional presenting, for being able to communicate well. Tell us a little bit about the book. Like, what was the spark with that, and who is it been written for?
Yeah. Thank you. So this is the book. It's called Presenting, the Art of Public Speaking and How to Do It Better. And I co-wrote it with a friend of mine, Jeffrey Goldsmith. And Jeff, it was interesting because Jeff reached out to me one day and he was like, "Hey, I have an idea. I think we can write a book together." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And so Jeff used to work for Wired magazine back in the day. Jeff's like 10 years older than me. And he used to interview quite iconic cultural figures like Cheech and Chong and Allen Ginsberg. And he would take those interviews and then turn them into content for the magazine. And he came up to me and he was just like, "Hey, why don't I want to interview you about your work and about what you do with people. And then we can turn that into a book. What do you say?" And I was like, "Oh, that sounds like an interesting project." And, I thought it would be fun to work with my friend. And so we took about 2 years and we conducted a series of Zoom interviews. And I gave him some content that I share with clients. And so he would read it and then he would just ask me questions about that content, essentially trying to unpack like what I do, why I do it, and how I do it. And so it turned into this book. We took the videos, we transcribed them, and then I sat down and did a big editing project basically and put it all into a narrative structure and chapterized it and had it make sense for people essentially. And I'm really proud of it because essentially it's teaching all the things that I teach all my clients. And it's packaged in a way that you can really walk away learning some new, not only like strategies and tips, but really like mindset shifts about things. Because I think that is one of the keys to being a good public speaker is having the right mindset around it. So yeah, this book is written for anyone who wants to take a message to a stage and share it with people and have that message land. Like plenty of people can go on a stage and say some stuff, but if they really want to make an impact and they really want the audience to come up to them after and say, "Wow, that really moved me. That was powerful," then you're going to learn how to do that in this book.
Yeah. I mean, you pretty much open the book with saying about how being on stage is more about a conversation. You're having a conversation with your audience, and then the book goes into a conversation. You are listening into a conversation, which I think is great. It's a great way of you feel like you're being let in on a great level conversation that is exactly what you want to be learning about. And I love that. I particularly love that aspect of it as well, because it made it very digestible for me rather than just straight reading content. If it was a two-way street of content and information, much like we're having here today. So It's a great book, and it
Thank
really
you.
lays out everything really well. I love the style of it, and pretty much agree with it. Everything I read in there as well. I was like, yeah, yeah.
I'm preaching to the choir. Sure.
For me, for sure. But I always think, that one of the reasons why I always love to read more things about stuff it's like, okay, it's stuff I already know, but do I know everything? I do not. And do I sometimes hear things in ways that help me get things in new and different ways, or see different distinctions on things? I do. And certainly your book allowed that as well for me. It's like got some new distinctions on things. So as much as you might be an expert or know stuff, there's always more to learn. There's always new ways of saying things and understanding them that is well worth checking back in with great content like that. So I appreciate the book. For our listener who may be wanting to check out the book and think, oh, this sounds really good, maybe I should take a look at that. How can they find out more about your book?
Yeah, well, you can definitely get it on Amazon, and you can also find it on my website. So if you go to rebecca-williams.com/book, you can get it there too, or they'll lead you to Amazon. So yeah.
I will put links in the show notes and
Thank
the
you.
YouTube description for anyone who wants to go and check that out. But Rebecca, I've loved this conversation. There's so many questions I didn't get to that I hope to today. So I hope you might consider coming back in the future to discuss some more things. But it has been every bit as much fun as I thought it was going to be. So thank you for coming and being my guest today.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thank you. That was fun.
If you remember one thing from Rebecca today, make it this: connection beats perfection. Start your next talk by connecting first. Hook with a clear point and problem, and tell us where you're taking us. Then practice like a pro. Build it on paper, rehearse the flow, and reframe nerves as excitement. Try it this week. Open your meeting with a question, deliver a single crisp point, and watch how the room leans in. When you do, tell me how it went in the comments or on LinkedIn. If this helped, subscribe for more practical frameworks every week. Share this episode with one person who presents often. And if you're feeling generous, a quick rating or review helps more speakers find this resource and start connecting for real. Your voice matters. Now go and make it land.